Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back. It is a brand new episode of Bets and Banter, and this week on the show, we're going over UFC Vegas 103, and I'd be lying if I said it was the best fight card that they've got on paper. We've got Cody Brundage in a co-main event, so it's not the deepest UFC card that you've ever seen, but we're going to break it down nonetheless. We got the New York State Wrestling Championships this weekend, so your boys got to get this work done early. So without further ado, guys, let's break it down, starting with the first fight of the night and work our way on up to the top. What's at the top? We're talking about a flyweight main event this week. It's going down with Manel, Kape, Astro Boy, Starboy, taking on the other side, Asu Almabayev. This is somebody who's only 4-0 in the UFC, looking to break through with a defining performance after 4 straight wins. So we've got an interesting main event. But like we always do on Bets and Banter, we're going to start at the beginning of the card and then work our way on up. So shout out to the Night Owls who made it out with us. We're doing a late night show today. Had to find a way to get it in. I'm leaving for Albany tomorrow morning to go to the New York State Wrestling Championships, like I mentioned. So it's going to be a great weekend. I'm really excited for it. But without further ado, guys, let's start with the first fight of the night. We've got Montana De La Rosa taking on Luana Carolina. And let me go ahead and share this on the screen so you guys can see what I'm looking at here on Tapology, and we can deal with these fights together. So first and foremost, this is not the kind of fight that I want to find myself betting on very much in 2025. Just straight off the rip, I'm looking to bet on proven commodities. You've got 2 women in this fight that are both middling UFC fighters, I would say. In terms of who is more proven, it's actually Luana Carolina. I believe she's 6-3 with the promotion. Let me just go ahead and double check my work here. It's off the top of my head. Yeah, that's accurate. So she's 6-3 with the promotion. On the other side, you've got a Montana De La Rosa who is 6-5-1. So she's been around for a long time, but basically clinging to a 500 record with the UFC. And I was able to take in these women's most recent fights before we got on the air tonight. Now, Montana De La Rosa in her last fight was able to go out there and box up Andrea Lee in the second round. That was a pivotal point in the fight for her, kind of swung the fight in her direction. She got multiple takedowns in that fight. In round 1, she kind of got rocked, got a takedown, ended up in the bottom position. If I had to criticize Montana De La Rosa's game, I would say that her ability to maintain the top position is not admirable. Sometimes she falls over the top looking for submissions. She forgets the position over submission moniker. But in this matchup, you look at Luana Carolina, she's got long limbs. She's got a big body. I do think there is some possibility that Montana De La Rosa can have success getting to her body lock takedowns. If you look at the people that have gotten in 2 takedowns on Luana Carolina, oftentimes you're seeing they are attacking the body lock. We saw Jalisha Stolyarenko get to those positions. Now, the things that I like about Luana Carolina, where she's been making some improvements over time, she does try and dig underhooks. We saw that in her most recent fight. I'm drawing a blank now on the woman's name. Gosh, I feel so bad. I literally just watched the fight. Forgettable. Lucy Pudilova. That's who it was. Lucy Pudilova. What we saw from her in that fight was Pudilova got to a handful of takedowns, but most of the time they were late in the rounds. They were kind of catching her off guard. You can see Luana Carolina is a primary striker. So sometimes when she's going for spinning attacks, when she's going for kicks, when she's getting herself out of position, she gives up easy takedowns. And I do think that Montana De La Rosa, if she's smart in this fight, could have a more imposing top game. Andrea Lee, for all of her faults and for how close she is to the end of her career, and we'll talk about her later in the card, the one thing you note in that fight is that she used some real athleticism early in that contest. Montana De La Rosa took her down straight into the full mount, and she was able to, basically roll her hips back to the top position. And Montana De La Rosa then was working for a triangle choke from bottom, actually had it close to set up towards the end of the round. You saw a few times, that she was able to get back to those threats where, Andrea Lee, she's a very limited fighter in terms of her offense, but she does have defensive awareness. She's not easy to finish. She's only been finished, I think, 1 time in her career, if my memory serves. So I think that Montana De La Rosa does have some opportunity to go out there and make this an interesting grappling match. But in terms of the striking, her boxing is very slow. I do think she's made some improvements in terms of her willingness to throw, her looking for uppercuts, her trying to move her head off the center line, her trying to mix in some elbows. We saw all of that in her most recent contest. But on the other side of things, you got a Luana Carolina who's going to throw longer range kicks. I think she's a little bit faster. I think her footwork is a little bit better. In the small cage, how much is that going to matter? It might be a gross fight that takes place in the clinch for long portions of the fight. And I think even last time out, Andrea Lee thought she got the win. Montana De La Rosa ended up getting her hand raised. She's basically a coin flip type of fighter in the UFC. And if you go over and look at the prices, it's been bet down a little bit. It opened at plus 170. I'm looking at plus 145 on Bet Online. It got bet all the way down to even money. Now she's a slight underdog. It feels to me like this should be a closely lined fight, but I do think Luana Carolina should be favored. I think she's more likely to end this fight ahead on the significant strike totals. And if somebody was to, get their face really busted up in this one, I do think it's Montana De La Rosa. When we watch her fight, her defense is not very good. And I do think Luana Carolina could have some success landing her knees up the middle. One thing that you have to say about Luana Carolina is she's tried to build in these elements of her game where she will punish you for attempting grappling over and over. And we saw Lucy Pudilova get her face really busted up. A lot of that was a, result of those knees up the middle, those Muay Thai double collar tie clinch knees from Luana Carolina. And I think those are live once again in this spot. The one thing I will note is a lot of these girls are not natural wrestlers at all that are trying to wrestle Luana Carolina. And I do think Montana is a much more natural wrestler. So, this might be the kind of fight where you're ready to live click Montana De La Rosa if she's able to get an easy first takedown. Because if she's able to go out there and easily wrap a hold around Luana Carolina and bring her to the mat, I do think she can impose her will and her skill set in this fight. But aside from that, if she's struggling, she goes out there, her first takedown doesn't work, her second takedown doesn't work, I think this fight could spiral out of control for her really quick. So for me, this is not the kind of fight I want to get involved in, especially at the close odds. I do think it should be a closely lined fight. I don't think either one of these women is head and shoulders above the other, but the one with a clear winning record and the better trajectory right now to their career is Luana Carolina. The one with more experience is Montana De La Rosa. The one with striking upside is Luana Carolina. The one with grappling upside is Montana De La Rosa. So for me, it just feels like kind of a wash and not a fight that I want to be betting on, certainly. But good luck no matter how you're targeting that fight. I guess if you press me for a pick, I'll go Luana Carolina. Next up, guys, we got Charles Johnson taking on Ramazan Temirov. And as far as I'm concerned, this is the co-main event of the evening. This is certainly one of the better fights on the card. And you've got Charles Johnson, 6-4 record with the UFC. Deceptive 6-4 record. It's a very good record in the promotion. He's beaten solid opponents. He's gone out there and knocked out guys like Joshua Van that are the talk of the flyweight division. But now we've got another knockout puncher, scary guy in Ramazan Temirov. He recorded 3 knockdowns in his first UFC contest. You have to be honest and say that's impressive in this flyweight division. Charles Johnson has had 10 fights in the flyweight division. He's recorded 3 knockdowns as well. So we've got a 3-to-1 knockdown ratio for Charles Johnson, and he's a very impressive fighter. He's got excellent ability to press his cardio. When you look and see this guy's gone 5 rounds before in the LFA. He's had 10 fights in the last, since July of 2022. So this guy's been one of the most active fighters in the UFC. What are the concerns for Charles in this spot? I think the first and foremost is, he's fought some fairly close margins, right? You look back at the most recent fight, Sumu Derji. I thought he was going to run away with that fight. I thought he was going to have a clear skill advantage on the mat as well as on the feet in that fight. And it ended up being a very close scrap. It ended up being Charles Johnson having to dig deep, go to the well. And this is a guy who is 34 years of age, who's had over 20 professional fights. So he's kind of been through the ringer. He's been in a lot of tough scraps. He fought for title fights on the regional scene. He had to do it the hard way. No easy fights. So I think that Charles Johnson, the only worries that you have are he's had 10 fights since 2022. He's been extremely active. His chin has been touched a little bit. He has been buzzed, rocked, hurt in some of these fights before, including that Sumu Dershi fight. and he's getting right back in there to take on a dangerous killer in Ramos Temirov, who's got a massive social following, who's a guy that really is going to come out there and press his advantages in round one. He's got confidence. He's got piss that will probably melt through a cup. Like, this guy just looks like he's ready for prime time in a lot of ways. But on the other side of things, like, who's the more proven guy? Who's the guy who's gone out there and done it against high-level pros at this level in the UFC every time he's called upon, gone out there and gave a great account of himself? That's Charles Johnson, and he's been fighting the very best. So this is a fight for me where, I have to lean ever so slightly towards Charles Johnson. I'm going to do a bit more tape study on Ramos Temirov because, honestly, I remember his fight against CJ Vergara very well. I went back and rewatched that, but he's had a lot of fights on the regional scene. I want to go back and watch the 3-round fights, right? The ones that went deeper, the ones that were a little bit more pressing on the cardio, the ones where he had to wrestle a little bit, because I do think Charles is probably going to be in deep water in the first round of this fight. But I know that when the pedal hits the floor, this guy has found a way to rally back in round 2 and round 3 before. We know that he's done that against high-level guys, and we also know that he's gone out there and performed as an underdog before in the UFC. I bet him as a plus 123 underdog, I think it was, against Jake Hadley, and he went out there and got the job done. Jake Hadley no longer with the promotion, and he's going to look for better pastures over in PFL, I believe. So Ramos Temirov, I think, is here to stay. I think he's going to win UFC fights. I think he's one of the more potent power punching guys we've seen come into this flyweight division in some time. But at 28 years of age, I do think he's got a little bit more seasoning at this level before he's ready, to move into that top 5, top 10 discussion. And I think Charles Johnson is ready to go right now. So I feel like my pick here is going to be Charles Johnson, but at any kind of chalk, I cannot get behind that play this week. I do think one thing you have to consider when laying chalk pre-fight is, do I think this fighter is going to win the first round? And I do think there is a large possibility Ramos Temirov comes out and either hurts Charles in the first round or outlands him in terms of volume, aggression in the first round. But could I see Charles coming back, picking him apart in rounds 2 and 3? Absolutely. That's a veteran lesson. That's what he can provide in this spot. So at flyweight, 34 years of age, maybe he gets his chin tested in this spot. But otherwise, I think that when it gets down to it, in cardio, conditioning, confidence, rounds 2 and 3, that's Charles Johnson's time to shine, time to dig deep, and teach this kid how to swim in those dark waters. So I think that this is the time for Charles Johnson to make that push. Ramos Temirov takes this lesson, moves forward, and has a lot of success in the division. That's the way I see it early on in the week. Stay tuned for my Roto Grinders article this week. It's also available on Patreon and everywhere else. But I just say that because I'm going to do more analysis on Ramos Temirov, watch a little bit more tape. Some of those women's fights, maybe aren't going to get as much of my close attention. I'm obviously going to try and find the right winner, try and give the right analysis like always. But this is a fight where I'm very interested in the fight and the fighters, both of them moving forward, where their futures are in the division. So one that I'm going to try and tape closely as best that I can. So with that being said, guys, let's move along to the next fight on the card, where we've got Andrea KGB Lee, the aforementioned, taking on JJ Aldrich at 125 pounds. So, oh boy, I mean, this is not a fight, again, that I would want to be investing my money in, right? This is the kind of fight where you think to yourself, like, man, disaster awaits typically for JJ Aldrich. She goes out there and she's just had some moments where she has a lot of success early in a fight and just lets it slip through her fingertips, kind of can't keep the momentum of a fight rolling, doesn't allow herself to move forward, almost a victim of her own success. And when I'm looking at this fight, I say to myself, okay, I haven't gone back and watched JJ Aldrich's most recent fight against Veronica Hardy back, but what I do remember is thinking it was at least a fairly close fight. I thought JJ Aldrich might have rallied in round 3, if my memory serves. Meanwhile, Andrea Lee, I went back and watched the Montana De La Rosa fight, and some of the things that stand out, she was so slow in the second round. I mean, just like allowing Montana to read her offense, move out of the way, box her up. Her kicks were coming in slow and predictable. And I think that Andrea Lee, it's ironic. Her ground game in some ways has been the most potent part of her offense lately, where she's able to get women to the ground, where she's able to reverse positions when she's on bottom. But it's like she doesn't know how to function as a top position player. It's like she doesn't know what she wants to do from the top position. And so I feel like she's just a very ineffective fighter. She's a fighter that has some tools, but it just does not flow together to be a very cohesive, functional mixed martial arts game. And I think that at 36 years of age, it's going to be very hard for her to change that. We've seen it. It's been a losing formula in the UFC. She's got a losing record with the promotion, never quite panned out. JJ Aldrich, for all of her faults, has a winning record with the promotion. She's gone out there and fought a tough level of competition, taken rounds off really good fighters as well. So you can say, crying in your coffee for Andrea Lee, she had a couple close split decisions go against her. I just really don't know what level she's at this point. I don't know what her level of commitment is to fight hard for 15 minutes. She starts a fight, comes out looking one way, and in rounds 2 and 3, I don't know if you're getting the same level of explosivity, of commitment, of aggression, of cardiovascular preparation. So I think JJ Aldrich is probably the more likely fighter to come in prepared and conditioned to fight hard for 15 minutes. But do I trust her? No, I think she's given us plenty of reason not to trust her in her UFC career. Shout out to the sharpest chat in the game, by the way. I've seen some people making their presence felt. Owl Gang says, Cameron Jerkin, appreciate you. Elijah says, let's go. Happy to catch the show live. Let's get it in. Absolutely. Good morning, gentlemen, says Glenbot as well. We got Daz Files in the building. Hope Montana wrestles here. If not, she seems to be getting better on the feet. The plus money's got me in. Hey, fair enough, Daz. I don't hate that look. It's got to be Dogger Pass, I feel. Montana De La Rosa only attempting one takedown against Aldrich was concerning. Yeah, I agree with you. But Aldrich kind of has that short stature and pretty good takedown defense in terms of her first layer. When you look at Aldrich, I think that she would probably have dug underhooks pretty well. And we'll have to see how Luana Carolina does. She's a much taller opponent. That does open up the body for those body lock takedowns, but also it does mean you've got to be pretty assertive physically in order to lift somebody off the ground. They've got legs underneath them. You've got to block those out with your own legs, or you've got to lift them up and slam. I think it might be time to say MDLR sucks, says JJ. Luana Scrappy in the clinch, he says. All-Star says, let's effing go. Absolutely. If Lee caught in scrambles, Veronica Hardy was in JJ's last fight, do you think Lee survives or does she get subbed? Lee been subbed twice in round 3. I think it's possible, but not very likely. I just don't think JJ Aldrich is extremely assertive on offense. But, Andrea Lee, I do think her career is winding down. I'll leave it there. Always good to catch you live, says Cole. Shout out to you and the sharpest chat in the game. Shout out to you. Shout out to the sharpest chat in the game. And let's not spend any more time talking about these women's fights that we have this week, because they're just not very high level. I don't mind talking about WMMA, but it's just not the most inspiring offerings this week all around, and including on the WMMA side. Let's go back to men's MMA. And this one, I've got some thoughts. And this is one where I had to tape this fight to talk about it with my guy, VB. If you guys didn't check that out, no worries at all. But I wanted to let you know, I was on with VB earlier this week. He asked me, hey, could you come on, talk about a couple fights? I was like, no problem. And this is one of the fights he wanted to talk about. It had me looking back at my betmma.tips. And if you guys don't know, I've been tracking my bets for a very long time. I never claimed to be the greatest bettor in the world. I'm far from that, but I have been doing it for a long time. I have tracked my results for many, many years. I have been profitable over the course of my time tracking my results, and I've been doing well to start this year. So knock on wood, we can keep that going. But with that being said, I look back all the time and I see, how have I bet on these fighters in the past? Have I done a good job? Have I done a shitty job? Do I have a good read on them? Or am I struggling to read the board when they fight? Those are the things I want to know before I go back and make a bet, right? And with somebody like Rob Font, I had done a good job capping his fights in the past. Okay, let's go ahead and fire there. And we had a good bet. Almeida is a guy that I've had a good experience capping his fights. If you look back, he's been an underdog of this price, in the past. And I bet him against Mike Trezano. I bet him inside the distance at plus 400. He went out there and cashed both those tickets, rallied from a knockdown, got a knockdown of his own. Against Pat Sabatini, I laid off. I thought that was a horrible spot. Against Andre Fili, I also laid off. But then against Timmy Kawamba, I was there again as an underdog bettor. And if you look, He's now 2-3 against the UFC level competition and against the best guys, against the guys that you'd expect he's going to struggle with. He loses, right? And what I mean by that especially is specialists, guys that are really good at one thing. Pat Sabatini, if you want a wrestling grappler, you're going to find out what time it is. This guy, Pat Sabatini, is very good there. Problem is, Pat Sabatini can get cracked on the chin. So if you go out there and fight Pat Sabatini, D up some takedowns, crack him on the chin, you can win the fight. So that's the kind of thing where Pat maybe doesn't get the top 15 ranking, but everybody knows that this guy's grappling is legit. So he takes Lucas Almeida down. He beats him pillar to post. He gets the win there, and people are now out on Lucas Almeida. He stinks. He loses to Zellhuber in a war where Zellhuber, who, by the way, took what would have been fight-ending shots in any other fight from Ribovics, right? And he is able to find a gear to push through that, and he's landing shots at the end of regulation against Ribovics. At the end of that third round, he is throwing, he is landing, and you just got to say to yourself, man, hats off to Zellhuber. This kid's clearly got heart and the ability to fight for 15 minutes. So Lucas Almeida lost a war against Zellhuber on Contender Series. Okay, then he loses to Sabatini, who's a good fighter. He gets knocked out by Fili. Fili the other day was cooking on the feet before he went to the ground and got submitted. You know, if you look at Andre Fili, he can get touched on the chin. He takes a lot of risks on the feet, but his offense on the feet has never been a problem. He's always been very potent offensively on the feet. So I think that when you look at those fights, you could say to yourself, you know, you make a pass for Lucas Almeida. You also say to yourself, man, those are some experienced guys. Those are some guys that have been around. Now you look at Danny Silva, and as far as I'm concerned, Danny Silva has a brighter future. You know, if you look at 5 years from now, Danny Silva might still be in the UFC, and Lucas Almeida is probably going to be long since retired from the promotion. But the fight is not 5 years from today. It's on Saturday. And I look at these two guys. I say to myself, okay, Danny Silva, he's been around the right guys to improve. You know, he's been around guys that are going to help him. I think Cub Swanson, if I'm not mistaken, one of the guys that has looked out for him, kind of built up his career a little bit. And again, nothing but respect for these guys. But he goes to absolute war with Angel Pacheco, exchanging hundreds of significant strikes at a clip in that fight. He gets outlanded on significant strikes, if my memory serves. Let's go pull up UFC stats. You guys know I never want to speak out of my ass on this show. I always want to speak straight facts to you guys. And my memory is pretty good, but when I'm even slightly unsure, I will double check. Josh Coolabout outlanded him 87-45 on significant strikes. And this guy, Danny Silva, was out there wrestling like it was a life-dependent event. And did I think his wrestling looked world-class? No. Did I think his grappling looked sensational? I did not. Did I think that his striking looked good? It looks fine. It doesn't look defensively very good. So I think in this fight, Lucas Almeida could definitely get cracked out on the chin. Like, I think that's possible. I think he could get out wrestled here. He's a tall guy. He's a little long. But I think that when it comes down to it, this guy's got skills. I think he's going to compete. I think he has a chance to crack Danny Silva on the chin and hurt him bad. So I think it's an Almeida or pass situation at the underdog prices. And I think he's going to go out there and fight hard for your dollar. So that's the way I see it. Henry says, wow, no just win. This is crazy. Me and Rich have spoken since the last time we recorded a show. We're not doing the show anymore. There's no bad blood. There's no problems or aggravation. It's all love. We're just not doing the show together. It's all good. So we're both doing our own thing. He's doing his own thing. Wish him well. Just doing my own thing. So I've been doing this show for a long time. I've been doing this show since well before I ever did the show with Rich. Me and Rich did the show for a while. I hope that you guys enjoyed that. But now we're no longer doing the show. I hope you enjoy this too. If you don't, my apologies, but that's the way that things are. So just letting you know. And I appreciate the feedback from everybody. I've gotten a lot of positive feedback. I've gotten some feedback of people saying they miss him on the show. I appreciate the feedback one way or the other, and I take it all under advisement, but just letting you guys know the lay of the land, and that's the way that it is. So ultimately, guys, my pick here is going to be Danny Silva, but I'm going to say, minus 110, minus 115 type line, and Lucas Almeida is going to be the money line side here, and I'm considering a play on that side. And maybe after all said and done, if I go back and watch that Angel Pacheco fight and it's as bad as I remember, then maybe I'll just pick Lucas Almeida to win the fight outright. But in any case, next up, guys, we got Douglas Silva de Andrade taking on Jean Castaneda. And this is a fight where Douglas Silva de Andrade, talking about guys whose, piss could melt a cup. He's definitely been one of those guys over the years. I don't know if he's still kind of rocking with that lifestyle, but he definitely has looked like that over the years. And I say, at 39 years of age, we know that fighters are a lot more susceptible to getting knocked out. I think that's something that we want to watch for here. But skill for skill, I feel like this fight is probably a little bit closer than the line entails. I think Castaneda pushes a good pace. I do think that he's a guy that's pretty reliable to go out there and try and push a multifaceted game to try and strike with you on the feet, try and mix in his takedowns as well, try and keep you guessing. But as far as I'm concerned, Castaneda, we've seen a few times in the UFC where he's not able to dominate his opponent, where he's not able to pace them substantially, where he's not getting to his takedowns as cleanly as he's looking for, then he can start to get busted up on the return. He can start to get hit a little bit. And we know Douglas Silva de Andrade, he's a grinder, man. He's willing to bite down on that mouthpiece. And even after getting hit, busted up, hurt a little bit, out wrestled, outmaneuvered, whatever it is, he'll try and come back on you, swinging big bombs and try and take you out of the fight. And again, we've seen that be a potent way to get to Castaneda. Despite having fewer fights as a professional and in the UFC, he does have more losses on the Castaneda side. So I think that's something that we want to keep in the back of our minds as well. Douglas Silva is fighting very high quality of competition throughout his UFC career. I think Castaneda has fought a little bit lower quality of competition despite fighting a fine level of competition. So I think the youth favors him. I think the reach favors him. I think Castaneda's ability to push a pace at this point of his life and career probably favors him. But if he's not able to get to takedowns and he's absorbing a lot of damage in this fight, things could go sideways. And you're being asked to pay a 70% privilege for a guy in Castaneda who, was a big underdog in a lot of his UFC fights. I remember betting him at plus 190, plus 170 type price tags earlier on in his UFC run. So now you're looking at a heavier favorite price tag against a higher level of competition. I'm not going to get to the window with Douglas Silva de Andrade, I don't think, but I definitely will not be getting Castaneda at these big favorite price tags based on what I know. So I feel like Castaneda, good fighter, solid out, kind of guy you want to bet on at plus money because he's a dog. He'll go out there and fight hard for your money, but I don't think he's got a huge skill gap anywhere in this fight that would justify the big favorite price tag personally. So I'll go rewatch the tape, make sure that my eyes do not deceive me. I did not go back and rewatch their most recent fights like I have with a lot of the other fights on the card. I went and talked about the other fights where I have talked about, the fights I just rewatched. This is not a fight where I've rewatched both these guys super recently. So I don't want to let my recency bias or the fact that I haven't rewatched the footage color my opinion here. So again, this is one I'd stay tuned for the article, but ultimately I'm going to lean with John Castaneda as the pick, but I think the price is prohibitive on John Castaneda. All right, folks. Next up, we got Ricardo Ramos taking on Chepe Mariscal at 145 pounds, and huge favorite price tag on Chepe Mariscal in this spot. But I think the things when you look at what makes Chepe, the favorite in this fight, it's not his level of UFC experience, right? Ricardo Ramos has more UFC fights. It's not his professional record. He's 17-6. Ramos is 17-6. It is simply when you look at Chepe Mariscal, he will go out there and fight hard for your money like a dog. And that is why he's been an admirable underdog in his UFC run. That is why he has been so impressive. He fights hard. He fights through every position. He fights for the full 15 minutes. He's trying to hurt you. He's trying to land damage. He's trying to run up the strike totals. He's trying to do a lot of things right as a UFC fighter. And that's why Chepe Mariscal gets respect at the window. But I do think, again, it's another fight where, do I think Chepe should be a clear favorite? Yes, because of all the things I just said. Like, this guy is much more of a dog than Ricardo Ramos. You put Chepe in a shitty guillotine, and I don't think he's tapping out, period, point blank. I think you got to put him to sleep. I think you got to really go to break his arm. Like, it's got to be something serious to get this guy out of there. I don't think he's just going to give it up to you. And on the striking side of things, like, does Ricardo Ramos have the tools to knock out Chepe Mariscal? Absolutely. I mean, he's got absolutely devastating spinning strikes, the elbows, the kicks. He's got decent knees, but I don't think he's much of a puncher personally. And I think that when you look at his grappling game, I think a lot of it's going to be negated by Chepe's style. Chepe is an awkward judo player. He's going overhooks, throws, and he's a very physical, violent grappler. And I think that's things that Ricardo Ramos will not like at all. Ricardo Ramos likes to control, to dominate, to land his big shots, to dictate range. He likes to have a clean, pretty fight where he's in control. And I think Chepe Mariscal is unlikely to let him have a clean fight. So I think Ramos has a chance to spark him or to maybe be a level above in the grappling. I'll go back and rewatch some specific grappling sequencing, but my instinct is Chepe is probably going to hurt this guy. And it doesn't look to me like Ricardo Ramos wants to be out there. And one thing that you have to try and cap in these fights is will to win, because it's the number one attribute I want in a fighter, is somebody that wants to win. And Rob Font was willing to go out there and fake a glove touch to punch this guy as many times as he could, and he eked out the first round because of it. I'm not trying to bet on guys, that have a lot of skills, because skills are fine and skills can win fights, but I want guys that want to go fight like a dog for the win because they need it. And like, that's the kind of attitude I want them to bring. And I feel like Chepe Mariscal, every time he steps in there, fights like a dog who wants to win. And I feel like Ricardo Ramos, the biggest indictment you could make of his career is that the last few times he stepped in there, it didn't look like a guy who wanted to win as much as you wanted him to win. And I had Julian Erosa by submission at a big plus money number. I think it was plus 600 against Ricardo Ramos, because I'll literally pull it up because I thought it was funny. But my essential write-up, and I don't even have to pull it up, but I could just tell you that my tracked bet on Bet MMA basically said Ramos' soft grappling performance last time out, and long limbs for Erosa. That was all I needed to know. You're going to give me plus 600 on Erosa by sub when Ramos gave a very soft grappling performance the last time out. What do I mean by soft grappling performance? I don't mean to be disrespectful. I just mean to be straight up with what I saw. Some guys, you have to kill them you have to put them to sleep. Think Arman Saruki and Charles Oliveira. Is he tapping because the choke sucks? No, he's going fully flat on his stomach and saying, unless you're going to put me out with this, you could take my back, you could do whatever you want, but I'm not tapping to this choke, period. I'm just not doing it. And it's like, that is a mindset, right? To say, I'm not giving up to this choke. Muhammad Makayev against Jafel Filo in the third round. Jafel Filo is ripping that knee bar. His knee is going the wrong direction. Most guys tap. Logical, sane guys tap. Champions say to themselves, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to tap. I'm going to find a way to win anyway. And he just got out and found the finish. That is a dog mentality. That is a different kind of fighter than somebody that's going to say, hey, self-preservation. I'm in a knee bar. I got to tap and get out of here. And there's nothing wrong with being either fighter, but you got to acknowledge who you are. And I think Ricardo Ramos is a self-preservation fighter. And I think Chepe Mariscal is go until you kill me or I kill you. And for that reason, I think Chepe is my pick. I think he's going to win the fight. But at minus 420, what are we doing here? He was an underdog for his first 3 UFC fights. And Ricardo Ramos, it is a little bit of disrespect on his side, but I understand the disrespect because it's coming from a place of not, hey, you don't have the skills because you lost these fights. It's you don't have the will to fight anymore. And unless he goes out there and shows us something different, it's hard to say otherwise. He's only 29 years of age. He's young. He should have every opportunity to improve in training, come back out, show a better product. But he's had that opportunity before. He's been around this promotion for a long time, and he hasn't distinguished himself yet. This would be a huge win, a breakout win for him. So let's see what happens in this one. But I'm going to pick Chepe Mariscal based on who's got that dog in him. Next up, we got Austin Lane taking on Mario Pinto. And I have to rewatch the tape on Mario Pinto to see if anybody has ever tried to wrestle him before, because I truly cannot remember anybody doing so. But ultimately, guys, I think Austin Lane is not very good. I think last time out, he was lucky to be fighting Robelis de Spain. I've picked Austin Lane by submission in the past against these heavyweights because I know how bad heavyweights are on the ground. This guy's top game isn't great. This guy, his ability to ground and pound from the top position is not very good. His takedowns are just okay. So do I think he has takedown upside in this fight? Yes, I do. But beside that, I just think Mario Pinto is probably being prohibitively priced and will probably win the fight anyway. So yeah, this is the way I see this fight. I don't really have a lot to say. I remember not being extremely impressed by Pinto coming into Contender Series, but I also remember not being impressed by Austin Lane in his UFC run so far at all. So, yeah, it just seems to me like a fight where I feel like Pinto's going to win and be overpriced. He's probably going to pop him at distance, probably going to eventually hurt him. I think Austin Lane's chin is not very good, but that's my overall assessment. I'd say Mario Pinto, probably round 2 or 3 TKO. Chepe price is deserved, says All-Star DFS, Ramos looked broken after not being able to get the choke on Culibao. By the way, how did he not finish that? Yeah, he just does not seem like the mentally strongest fighter, with all due respect. I take Pinto, dude, has decent takedown defense, says All-Star. When he was taken down, he sprung back up immediately. Oh, if that's the case, this is going to be a real problem for Austin Lane. Probably Pinto, KO or decision. That would be my instinct. And 4 says Castaneda, hittable, TRT, grandpa can crack. Fair enough, man. I like that description. That's a funny way to describe D.S.D.A. Pinto KO minus 140 seems fair. Yeah, I think that makes some sense. But again, I could see him just outpointing him to a decision. I think he's gone 5 rounds against regional bums before, so we'll see. All right, next up, left hand to God, Barlow is taking on Sam Patterson, and this is another fight that I taped for VB's show. Here's what I'll tell you guys. Sam Patterson has the pure Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu advantage, in my humble opinion. I think Danny Barlow is still a work in progress on the ground. I think that Danny Barlow is still a work in progress as a fighter. I think his knockout power is ridiculous and correctly rated as extremely powerful by the market. I think Sam Patterson's chin is sus. He's been hurt in several fights. He's been knocked out before. He's been brutally knocked out in the UFC, but he was cutting weight to 155 pounds before. He's now at 170, and he seems, even big for 170 compared to some of his opponents. So I don't think Sam Patterson was ever meant to make 155. He was cutting a ton of weight to do that. But on the other side, Danny Barlow, I don't know if he could make 155. This guy's big, 6'2", 79-inch reach. I feel like he's got some ability to hurt Sam Patterson in this fight and to bust him up at distance. The one thing I will say is Danny Barlow fought hurt. He fought sick. He broke his arm against Quinlan. But if you go back and watch that Quinlan fight, he outlands Quinlan with power shots. He busts him up. He hurts him. But he's bleeding out of his mouth. He's getting busted up in that fight. He's getting into some crazy exchanges. And he broke his arm because he blocked a head kick from Quinlan with one arm. And if you're in the habit of blocking kicks with one arm, you will break your arm again. You will definitely do that again. So I think Sam Patterson has the possibility of outperforming his price here. If he gets an easy takedown in the first round, he's going to look like an insane, wrong price fighter. But if he's not getting takedowns, I think he is going to get brutally knocked out in this fight. He keeps his chin up in the air. He does not take a punch very well. He has decent fundamental striking himself. He could land on Barlow, but I just think that the return fire will be so much more significant. And Barlow has very good timing on his counters. So he lands on most guys that he fights. He hits them pretty hard. Veretennikov, even in that fight against Vanderford, he was taking an absolute shit kicking, right? But he was still all there. All his mental faculties were there. He was just in a position where he could no longer intelligently defend himself. He's a tough bastard. Veretennikov's never been finished prior to that fight. So I think that people are a little bit harsh on Barlow for not finishing that, but also the price doesn't reflect that, right? Some people in their commentary and their criticism of Barlow, they noted that, that definitely needed some shoring up. But on the other side here, you got a Sam Patterson who I feel his chin is just very liable, and the UFC did him no favors with this matchmaking. So give me Danny Barlow. But I like the under as well in terms of like a way to theorize how this fight goes. If Barlow is not knocking him out in the first 7.5 minutes, I feel like that means he probably gave up a takedown. And Patterson is very aggressive on top. looking to pass, looking to be assertive with his ground and pound, looking to attack submission. So I think it's very plausible this fight ends early, and it's priced somewhat fairly to end in the first 7.5 minutes. So that's my thoughts on that fight. And we'll have to see more when props come out on domestics later in the week. If Sam could get his ground game going but can't get the sub, it would make Sam decision interesting. Yeah, I can see where you're coming from there. Hard to tuck the chin when you have the neck of a giraffe. That's fair. And I think I bet Danny Barlow by sub when he was on the Contender Series. Somebody had asked about Patterson sub, Cade in the chat. So shout out to all you guys. I appreciate everybody who's rocking with us. We got 60 people rocking with us on YouTube. I hope everybody has left a like on the show if you guys are enjoying what we're talking about. And if you haven't done so already, make sure to subscribe to the show and make sure to hit the bell for notifications so you know every time that we go live. If you're Barlow, there's no reason you should clinch with Sam. Keep the fight at range, and he should be fine. Yeah, it is a small cage, so I somewhat worry that Sam could try and just bull rush him into the fence. Sam tries to do that in a lot of his fights. He's a corralling fighter, looks to press people into the fence. Despite being long, he likes to press into people. He likes to take them down. He likes to wrap up body locks. I think against Barlow, the explosivity, it's going to make that very difficult for him to do. But maybe Sam can have, some success with the body lock. So we'll have to see. But I feel Danny Barlow is the deserved favorite, but another price that's blown out a little bit on a fight night card. Next up, we got Hyder Amil taking on William Gomis. And I feel like Hyder Amil has been very dangerous and quite potent since he made it to the UFC. We've seen him go out there and get a couple wins under his belt. We saw him go out there on Contender Series, land a lot of volume in a 15-minute decision. And, William Gomis is a guy that's done a great job of limiting volume from his opponents, not allowing people to land on him, making people miss, being a slick outside striker, using his footwork and his speed. I feel like this is the kind of fight where Hyder Amil trains with the right guys. He trains with a great team. He's going to go out there and try and pressure this guy from minute one. And I don't think Hyder Amil is as technical as William Gomis, but I have seen William Gomis get pressured before into making some mistakes. I think he was in a tight triangle choke against Jarno Aarons and was bailed out by the bell. And I think that we've seen Hyder Amil is a pressure factory. He's willing to go out there and pour out the jug. He's willing to die trying to pursue victory. And William Gomis is a guy that fights, very carefully. He fights very, methodically. And I always wonder how those guys are going to perform when they can't get their slick outside fight that they're looking for. And I think that in this fight, Hyder Amil is probably going to try to grab a hold of him, rip him to the ground, hit him with shots, push him back to the fence, keep him corralled, and it's a small octagon. So I think he can have some success doing that. If you look at where Gomis is successful, he keeps people on the outside, right? And he does a good job skirting around the outside using his footwork. I think that he has a chance to do that against Hyder here. I think his best chance to win this fight is to make him look silly by using his footwork, keeping him on the outside, touch and go, never get into extended exchanges, and kind of force Hyder to rely on bad outside attempts and winging shots. But ultimately, it just feels like the kind of fight where Hyder is going to go fight a little bit harder and closer than his price tag entails. And Gomis has been to some close fights. He's fought a fairly low level of competition, except for Joe Anderson Brito. I thought Brito kind of fought like a bonehead against him and pursued some of the wrong paths. So I think Gomis is a fine fighter, skilled guy, not bad, 27, still young, big build for the division. I think there's some positives about him, but I also think that his game is a kind of game that will break under pressure. So for me, I like Hyder Amil slightly as an underdog here, but I think William Gomis probably weasels his way to another split decision on first instinct. Smash the like. Chat says, Azure, I appreciate you. Thank you so much. People hate Gomis. Might bet him. He's good and boring. Fair enough. Gomis not fighting in France now. I think that's an important point by Glenn. And also the crowd normally goes crazy for him. Hyder Amil seems to get the crowd bumping in Vegas. So something to watch for here in the main card, featherweight contest. So I'm excited to see that one shake out. Next up, guys, I'm going to take a pause for the cause to take a quick sip. I've been talking nonstop. I'm going to have a great guest next week on the show, maybe even a panel of great guests. If there's people you guys would like to hear from, you can go ahead and fire them off down in the comments section below. I appreciate that. But that is something to look forward to. It will not just be me prattling on with my analysis, but I hope you guys do enjoy the solo shows as well. I put in just as much thought, effort, and analysis when I'm doing it solo as when I have a great guest. But I always want you guys to get a multitude of opinions so that way you can make a more informed choice when it comes to fight night. And my opinion is but one of many. I'll always tell you guys my honest opinions as best I can. But also I'll acknowledge I'm fallible, right? I get it wrong all the time. So I try and get it right. I try and be very careful. I try and be cognizant of the risks on either side. I try and be open and upfront about all that. But I just want to acknowledge, that there will be a guest coming up. So it's not just going to be me. I'm not making it all about me. It's nothing like that. And I appreciate everybody for the support. Next up, guys, Nasrat Haqparast at 155 pounds, taking on Esteban Ribovics. And this is a fun fight. I like Esteban Ribovics in this one, and I'll tell you why. When you look at these two guys, I think Nasrat Haqparast is a UFC lifer. He's been around. He's been in the trenches. He's fought tough guys. But I think we've kind of seen his ceiling, despite him being just 29 years of age. When we see him fight guys that know how to box, he struggles. And he is a guy that prides himself on his boxing. He's got good boxing skills. He's got some power in his hands. He's gone out there and secured some UFC knockouts, but we've also seen him get knocked out by Drew Dober. He got put on the highlight reel by Mr. Drew Dober. And we saw also that Nasrat Haqparast can be busted up on the return fire. We've seen a lot of guys bust him up, bust up his face. Even the most recent timeout, guys, against Jared Gordon. Jared Gordon is a very good fighter. He's a very talented grappler. He's a very sound fighter, but he is not known for his power. You can go through and look at his career. The reason they booked him against Paddy Pimblett is because he is not known for his knockout punching power. They were like, even if it goes to the cards, we could screw this guy. This guy, Jared Gordon, busted up Nasrat Haqparast's face very badly. Nasrat was bleeding all over his eyes, his orbitals. Everything was all cut up. And Esteban Ribovics is the kind of guy that's going to try and cut you up badly. When you look at that fight with Zellhuber is long. Zellhuber was trying to keep him at bay, keep him at length, right? Use those long tools that he has. And you saw Esteban Ribovics coming over the top with hooks, coming to the body, throwing all night, walking him down, getting in his face. When he needed a second, he would back up, take a deep breath, get back into the fire. And you see a guy like Nasrat Haqparast. He's had a couple guys now teach him a veteran lesson inside the UFC. You look at the Bobby Green fight, boxed his ears off, right? Boxed him every which way but loose. And then you see Dan Hooker. When guys get into exchanges with Nasrat and they don't like it, right? When he's starting to get off on some successful offense, they mix up the wrestling, they mix up the grappling, and they typically have some success taking him down. And I don't think that either guy is going to try and wrestle and grapple very much in this contest, but I wouldn't be entirely surprised if Esteban wanted to mix it in and was able to take down Nasrat. Honestly, like if you just look, Nasrat was not supposed to be getting out wrestled, out grappled easily by Dan Hooker, and he was, right. And that was something where I think it's been an indictment throughout his career of his lack of well-rounded skills. And I will say the positive for Nasrat is he trains with TriStar MMA, great team, great skills, great people to build around. But Esteban Ribovics seems to me to have a little more of that it factor. He's a guy that the UFC, in my humble opinion, could easily try and build around. When you look at the guy's skills, his marketability, he's a handsome guy. He goes out there, he puts a highlight reel together, and he's looking for offense. He's looking to put people on a highlight reel, whether it's the head kick against Terrence McKinney, whether it's the fact he rocked Loic Radzhabov on multiple occasions, whether it's the fact that he went out there and put on the fight of the year against Daniel Zellhuber and absolutely tested his Mexican chin. Every single thing that you could ask for from Esteban Ribovics, he is about one highlight reel knockout away, in my humble opinion, from UFC stardom. And the kid is 14-1. He's 28 years of age. He's on the right side of 30. Both these guys are young, more experience on the Nasrat side. but this is the kind of fight that screams to me Esteban Ribovics is just on a little bit of a different star trajectory. So if Nasrat gets the win, hats off to him. He'll be back into the deep end of the lightweight division. They'll give him some tough killers. They're going to try and find this guy, a tough matchup. But on the other side, I think they've been trying to build up Esteban Ribovics, right? It's just the way that they marketed him. Because you look at the Loic Radzhabov fight, that was a tough out. But he went out there and showed what he is capable of, showed how dangerous he was on the feet, showed how willing he was to push, to bite down, to keep getting back up to his feet. So I think that Ribovics has a chance to go out there and put a lot of damage on Nasrat Haqparast, and I just don't know if Nasrat's going to be able to do the same damage in return. So I think they're going to have a crazy fun fight, but I just have a feeling Ribovics, round 2, round 3, he's going to connect. He's going to bust up the face, the eye, and he's going to get the finish here. So I do think Ribovics probably finds a way to close the show, and I think he's the deserved favorite, but I don't think it's going to be an easy fight. I think Nasrat's going to make him earn it, but ultimately, I don't know that I trust Nasrat. Based on everything I've seen, I'll go back and tape a little bit more, make sure I've done my due diligence. He's the bigger fighter in terms of reach in this spot. Again, like I mentioned, a lot of UFC experience. There's some things to like on that side, but this guy Ribovics, he's put together an incredible highlight reel in a short amount of time, and I think that he's got all the makings of a future star. So for me, I got to go with my gut here. I got to go with Esteban Ribovics, El Gringo, to get the win in this contest. Next up, guys, we got the co-main event of the evening. Reluctantly, I have taped this fight in depth. I actually grabbed a good number on Cody Brundage early in the week at plus 135, and after about, a day, 2 days, I just cashed out my position for a small profit because I can't want it more than you want it. And I just don't know how badly Cody Brundage wants it at this point in his career. When it comes down to it, if you ask me, who's the better fighter between these two guys, like, I think Cody Brundage has more skills. He's a knockout threat. He's got the ability to mix in the wrestling, the takedowns, get on top of people. He's got the guillotines that he mixes in. Julian Marquez, in my opinion, has a better front headlock series than Cody Brundage because instead of going for constant guard pulls, he looks to finish the fight, from his feet. We've seen many times Julian Marquez looking for that standing choke, looking for an ability to lock up a standing guillotine. And I do think there's a possibility that we could see Cody Brundage get himself into that kind of bad situation this week. Julian Marquez constantly hunts that choke. And if Cody Brundage is doing what he's normally doing, hiding his head underneath, looking to avoid taking damage with head strikes, he could find himself in that front headlock scenario. But the way I see this fight, I would make Cody Brundage like a minus 115 favorite because if you look at it, you have a guy in Julian Marquez who has looked absolutely awful his last 3 fights. He's looked slow. He's looked stiff. He looked, just not very good, right? He didn't look as durable as he used to be. He was getting hurt badly by RoboCop, and then he got brutally finished. He was getting beaten pillar to post in the Zach Reese fight, whack with a body kick, whack with a left hook, whack with a right uppercut, and the guy is done. It's like just brutal finishes. The guy's getting hurt. The guy's getting rocked. The guy's getting wobbled. The guy's getting finished. Marc-Andre Barrios absolutely put him through the trenches, right? Like beat him up, took him into the second round and finished him. The guy who's mentally tougher and wants to win more is probably Julian Marquez. So it's like a rock and a hard place, this fight. Cody Brundage has gotten real wins in the UFC. He went out there and knocked out Tresean Gore violently, hurt him on the feet, followed him to the ground, passed to the full mount, and then brutally finished him, right? Like, good stuff from Cody Brundage. But then you see the Rodolfo Vieira fight. Hurts him, rocks him, follows him to the ground. Then he multiple times pulls the guillotine. The guy is just making the same mistakes over and over again. 2 of his last 4 fights, he has found a way out because of shots to the back of the head against Abdulrazak Al Hassan and against Jacob Malkoun. One of those was a disqualification win. One of those was a no contest. I don't think there's a lot of positives that you could say about Cody Brundage, except that he's the underdog, he's the younger fighter, and he is the guy that should have the wrestling upside, the takedown upside, and frankly, in my opinion, the KO1 upside. I think that Julian Marquez has the ability to win this fight in rounds 2 and 3. I think he's got the ability to win this fight by submission. Those are kind of the ways I see this fight going down. I think Brundage has a chance to knock him out early. I think he's got a chance to beat him up early. He has gone out there and done that before in the UFC, but we've also seen he's quit several times. We've seen a lot of sketchy things, in my humble opinion, from Cody Brundage inside the octagon, where he doesn't look like he wants to be out there competing, where he's looking for a way out, where he's giving guys opportunities to get on top of him, where he's losing fights to guys that he's better than. And Julian Marquez on the other side, he's lost 3 fights in a row to 3 guys that probably deserve to beat him, 3 guys that probably are just better than him at this stage of their career, that were a little bit hungrier. But I do feel this is the kind of fight where if it comes down to who wants it better, Julian Marquez will win. If it comes down to skills and who's better, I think Cody Brundage wins the fight. So the last thing I want to mention here, some people were giving me grief this week because I said that James Krause, the sad irony of his situation is that he was a great coach and corner. Go back and watch Julian Marquez against Maki Pitolo and the cornering that James Krause gave him in the 3rd round and tell me that he's not a great corner. I try and coach athletes all the time. Sometimes you need to tell athletes exactly what they need to hear. He said to Julian Marquez, I need you to go out there and finish him. Finish or it doesn't count. Basically, don't go out there and fight to win 1 round. You know what happened? If you look at the official scorecards for that fight, Maki Pitolo was up 20-18 on every judge's scorecard, and Julian Marquez came back and finished him anyway because he wanted to be there. He wanted to fight hard, and he wasn't afraid to go through the 15 minutes of hell. And I feel like Cody Brundage, we know he's afraid to go through 15 minutes of hell. So I'm happy to take that cash out at a plus money price, but there is no more James Krause in the corner for Marquez. He has been corner hopping everywhere. He used to train with Cody Brundage at Factory X. He's now training at the lab. I think the lab is a great gym, but we've seen the lab doesn't save everybody. Eric McConico, I think, was from the lab, and he got absolutely splattered last week. So the thing is, Anfor says Krause was a great coach. He could just not stop being a degen. Fair enough. I think that is a great point. Cody just admitted he gets scared in the octagon even when he's winning. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people do. I think a lot more people than you realize are afraid out there. They're victims of their own success, and the thing is, when I'm talking about James Krause, I'm just talking about the fact that he threw it away, right? He threw away the fact that he was a great coach and corner, and he got the best out of Julian Marquez. There's a video on Fight Pass you can go back and watch where they both talk about that fight, and they talk about the special connection that they have. Julian Marquez was basically fucking around in his career, would show up at the gym whenever he felt like it. He didn't take his career seriously, and Krause told him, that's not going to fly at my gym. You're going to show up every day on time. You're going to show up at every session. If you miss one, you're out of the gym, and that's the way it's going to be. And he got a better product out of Julian Marquez. So I don't think Julian Marquez has ever shown a similar product to what he's shown with the James Krause training that he had. And a lot of guys from Glory MMA and fitness, the same thing could be said of them, right? Where they've struggled to find that same form. So just a sad irony, and I wish it wasn't the case, but something that I noted, because when you go back and watch these fights and you do your research, Julian Marquez has not won a fight, guys, since the Sam Alvey fight in 2021. And I believe that he was being cornered by James Krause in that fight as well. So Krause was a good coach and a great scammer. He just got caught. I'm just busting your chops. Good stuff, guys. So appreciate both you guys for your feedback. All right, guys. With that being said, we can move on to the main event of the evening. This is far and away the best fight on the bill. Probably the only really quality fight that people should be stopping what they're doing and make sure they tune in for. And Manel Starboy taking on Asu Almabayev Zulfikar. And Asu Almabayev, I think he's put together a solid win streak in the UFC, 4-0, beat Ode Osborne, submitted him. I thought he was going to do so. Ode Osborne is a negative grappler for the highest levels. He's not a bad grappler per se, but he is a negative grappler at the UFC level. We've seen a lot of black belts, a lot of guys that are high quality wrestlers, grapplers, take him to the ground and exploit him on the mat. And I think that Asu Almabayev was no different. He was relentless with the takedowns in that fight, got him to the ground, advanced his positions, took the back, finished the choke. It was impressive. he went out there and dominated some low-level guys, and hats off to him for that. He did his job in those fights. And then it brought him to the Mateus Nicolau fight. And I thought the Nicolau fight was going to be an interesting scrap. I thought to myself, Nicolau is going to have opportunities to threaten with submissions potentially with his hands. And ultimately, there were moments of success in that fight for Nicolau. And Nicolau, I memory hold it, right? After the fight was over, before this week, if you had said, hey, how did that Asu Almabaev Nicolau fight go? I would have said, hey, drop Nicolau. He washed him. It was not a close fight. Round 2 of that fight was a Nicolau round. He put him in a deep choke. He had him in a lot of danger, nearly pulled his pants off. Then when they got back up to the feet, he was walking him down, stalking him with shots. If Nicolau had more power in his hands, there could have been something really going there. And Almabaev, the thing that scares me for him coming into this fight is he went back to the corner and he was huffing and puffing and he was panicking. And it took the corner to say, hey, man, relax, calm down, be easy. It's all right. Be easy. Go out there and look for your takedowns. Just get back on top of the guy. And he came out and, he was able to get the fight back under his control, landed a knockdown, finished in the top position, got the win, did what he's supposed to do. But that end of round 2 told me a lot of warning signs for Almabaev. He's 21-2, but how many times has he really been tested? How many times has he really been in the fire? Manel Kape has a 20-7 record. It's not as shiny. It's not as pretty, but he has fought real legit guys along the way. He's fought champions. He hasn't been finished. He's fought legit guys. So you have to say to yourself, okay, Manel Kape, he's been in there with real dudes, real fighters. He's got some wins. He's got some losses against these real dudes. He's 31, same age as Asu. So he's been more tested. He's got more UFC experience. He's been in there with better guys at this level. He's a little bit bigger. He's a little bit longer. Here's the other thing. He's the more dangerous guy as I see it. Asu Almabaev, he's never finished a dangerous guy. He's finished a guy like Ode Osborne, who's a little bit on the lower level. He's got one great win over Charles Johnson. Otherwise, his UFC resume is a little forgettable, to tell you the truth. So you say to yourself, okay, Manel Kape, what did Manel Kape do to that guy? He starched him. He knocked him out in the first round. So, okay, so we take that one off the table. Asu Almabaev's never finished a guy that's on this level. And Manel Kape has finished guys that are serious quality fighters. He's gone out there and landed big, hard shots, knockdowns. He's got a great knockdown rate for this flyweight division. So I think that Manel Kape, he's a dangerous fighter with an explosive ability. I think he's got good takedown defense. The problem with Manel Kape is he does not always bring a consistent performance to the octagon. I think he may have crossed over. I think he may have, gotten to the point where he needs to be in terms of his output, his level of aggression and maturity. But the Mokaev fight was a little bit of a red flag because in that fight, he got hurt. He started taking pictures. He ended up letting that fight slip through his fingers. Very close fight. So I think that Manel Kape, he's going close with a guy that, in my opinion, is a championship level fighter in Muhammad Mokaev, a guy that absolutely deserves to be with the UFC. So Asu Almabaev on the other side, I don't know that he could go, with Mokaev for 15 minutes. I think Mokaev could win that fight and finish him. Honestly, I think Mokaev could out-grapple him, out-maneuver him, out-position him. That's the way I truly see that. So when I try and consider this fight, I say to myself, okay, I got a guy here in Manel Kape who is the more UFC tested guy, who's got more explosivity and firepower on the feet, who I think has shown me he could go out there and fight hard for 15 minutes, whereas Asu Almabaev, he pushes a decent enough pace, but against guys that he can crush. When you're facing resistance, when the other guy's offering up some stuff, you're getting in close chokes, you're huffing and puffing between rounds, you're getting busted up on the fence line at the end of round 2. All those kind of things against a guy like Manel Kape, whose confidence is, very, very high. I think it all does not bode very well. So ultimately, I'm going to lean with the Manel Kape side here. I do think this is another one where I'd want to see one round of this play out before I confidently say he's a minus 230 favorite in this fight. But I do trust his experience, his higher level of fights, and his explosivity, his dynamic finishing abilities to make him a favorite in this contest. So I could see Asu winning by decision. To answer some questions from the chat, is Asu cooked on the feet? Says Pony. I think cooked would be a slight overstatement, but I don't think he's going to have a lot of success in the feet. He relies on his kicking. I think his speed is not going to be there against a guy like Manel Kape. I think Kape is faster. I think Kape's hands, it's like light years apart between these two guys. I don't think Asu wants any part of his hands. I think he would get boxed into pieces in a pure boxing match between these two guys. So I think Asu basically needs takedowns, kicks to keep him at bay. Otherwise, he's going to be in a lot of trouble. I think he's got to use a lot of feints and a lot of takedown attempts. Question, who is Kape's best UFC win? Let me get you an answer on that. Good question. Bruno Silva, Felipe Dos Santos, David Dvorak, Zhalga Zhumagulov, Ode Osborne. I would say that his best UFC level wins are Kai Asakura and Takeya Mizugaki. But I definitely take your point. He also beat Ian McCall back in the day and lost to Kyoji Horiguchi. So some high-level UFC fighters there. I think that you could argue he should have beat Mateus Nicolau, and I bet Nicolau that night, so I think I'm entitled to that opinion. And then on top of that, if you look at the best UFC win, I would say it's probably Zhalgas. Zhalgas was in a lot of really close fights. I know he ended up getting run out of the UFC, but he was in a lot of really close fights. I think he's a good fighter. Okay, Asu panicked after nearly being subbed, but who is Kape putting into tricky situations on the mat? I believe he attempted a submission against Felipe Dos Santos, if my memory serves. If Kape hands make him uncomfortable, he's going to lean on his strength, which is wrestling. Listen, if he can't get takedowns, I think he's screwed. That's my problem, Cade. But here's the other thing. If he is getting takedowns, is he holding Kape down? Because against Mateus Nicolau, he was not consistently holding him down. Mateus Nicolau was able to get back up to his feet a couple times, and he didn't even seem like he was that, desirous of getting back up to his feet, right? Like he wasn't trying to push the issue and really move up to his feet. He was trying to be a little bit more offensive off of his back, playing full guard. I think Manel Kape does have a ground game. I don't think he's a fish out of water off of his back, but I also think he's an explosive athlete. I think he's going to try and work back up to his feet in the small cage at the apex. I think he will try to put his back against the fence and work his way back up if he does get taken down. But that's where the fight becomes interesting. Asu has a chance. He can go out there and wrestle. That is his path to victory. But I think that he is wrestling reliant in this fight. I do not think he will fare well in a striking contest. And I honestly don't think he's going to get as much wrestling success as he needs to win this fight. If you look back, let's go back and look at Muhammad Mokaev and Manel Kape. So Manel Kape has a 77% takedown defense rate over the course of his career. He gave up 3 takedowns against Muhammad Mokaev on 8 attempts. I think Mokaev personally is a better wrestler than Asu by a margin, at least in terms of what he's proven so far. So I don't think Asu's a bad wrestler, but I just think that we've got to see a little bit more proof of concept. He's given up 2 takedowns to Mateus Nicolau in all these fights. He's never given up more than 3 minutes of control time. Mokaev had 2 minutes of control time. Mateus Nicolau had 2 minutes and 31 seconds of control time. And David Dvorak, who got 2 takedowns, had 2 minutes and 42 seconds of control time. So in his UFC career, we have never seen Manel Kape give up more than 3 minutes of control time. And I think that, I'm open to believing that Asu could be the one to do that. But for me, it's a prove it spot. For him. So my pick here is going to be Manel Starboy Kape to get the win in the main event, but I will do a full write-up on the entire card. Everything will be posted on Patreon first. Everything will go up on Roto Grinders as soon as it is overlooked by the editors and everything like that. So that's what I got for this week, guys. It's kind of a shitty card. I'm more excited for the New York State Wrestling Tournament than I am anything else on the UFC card this week. That's the God's honest truth. But I wanted to make sure I got this content out to you guys. I will let you know if I have any bets, action, whatever later on in the week. Right now, Almeida is one of those spots that I'm looking at as a potential click. He's been a very good underdog bet for me in the past, but we'll have to see how it shakes out. Big Stank Hank in the chat asks, who does the 5 rounds favor? Good question. I wish I had a good answer for you. I think Asu is a little unproven in the deep waters against a high-level fighter like this. And I do remember him slowing down, I believe, in the loss. Let me go check. So when he lost to Tagiru Ulanbekov, he slowed down, got beat up, and embarrassed in the third round of that fight. So I don't know that he's a proven 5-round guy. I'll go back and look for more evidence of that. Perhaps he's gone 5 rounds regionally, but I feel like he's a guy that his cardio is still a little unproven over 5 rounds. And I think for Manel Kape, you could say the same thing. But I've always liked what I've seen from him over the course of 15 minutes in the UFC when he does attempt offense. The times you don't like it are when he gets caught taking pictures and just is inactive out there. But I don't think that's from a lack of cardio. I think it's from a lack of pulling the trigger, right? It's more of getting frozen, paralysis by analysis, if you will. So that's what I have. I appreciate everybody for the support. God bless you all. I hope that you guys have had a wonderful week. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, go ahead and fire those off in the comment section down below. I wanted to say thank you so much. Somebody last week, I think it was Trap Lord, ended up putting in the timestamps. I really appreciate that. That was a very cool move of you. If you do that again, that's awesome. If not, I'll try and make sure that I get them put up. There will be timestamps at some point from somebody, that I can assure you. And I just appreciate all the support, guys. Thank you for the feedback, positive, negative, whatever you guys have for me. I will take it in earnest as long as it's presented respectfully. I will respond respectfully. And that's all I got for you guys. And for Ask, did I watch Ono versus Lee? I did not. I'm getting ready. I'm packing bags. I'm cleaning up my house. I'm doing all sorts of things before I leave for the state tournament, but I will go back and watch. I did see the result, 3-2 for Ono. I did tell the kids at practice earlier today that I thought Ono was going to get the job done. So does not surprise me. Japan right now in terms of MMA and wrestling is on the rise. They've got talent galore and they're looking to do their thing. Shout out to my guy Tatsuro Taira, 2-sport athlete. If you don't know, now you know. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your week. If you're looking for any more from me, information's down in the description box below. That's all I got for you guys. God bless. Good luck. Come back next week. We're having all the same fun again. Thanks, everybody. Take care.